Hello and welcome to a new edition of SustainaTalk TV. Dear audience, the chemical industry as such is one of the most energy-intensive sectors. For example, in Germany, all these companies account for some 20% of the annual energy demand. And as you might know, one of our Wacker's corporate sustainability goals is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 compared to 2020. And of course, energy plays an important role to achieve this goal. And to better understand the background, I invited two guests in my studio. So a warm welcome to Christian Essers, who is leading our energy purchasing, and also a warm welcome to Robert Baumann, who is responsible for our CO2 footprint in our corporate sustainability department.
Hello. Thanks for having us here.
But before we start, as always, a few either-or questions to both of you. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, then let's start. Do you rather prefer an electricity car or a conventional engine?
So far, I'll keep my conventional engine. That's sustainable as well, but probably the next car is electric.
Okay. And Robert, do you rather use an electricity bike or use your own muscle power?
Muscle power, of course, as long as it is possible.
Okay. As vacation is ahead of us, the question to you, Christian, do you rather prefer the mountains or the sea?
First the mountains, then the sea, please.
Okay. And how do you spend your vacation, Robert? Rather in a relaxing mode or rather in an active mode?
Most of the vacations in an active mode.
Okay. Yeah, currently we hear a lot about green electricity, green energy. What exactly is this all about, Robert?
Well, green energy is energy from renewable sources, like electricity from photovoltaics, from wind power or hydroelectric power, or heat and electricity from the incineration of biomass.
Mm-hmm. And how do we get all these kind of green electricity to our different sites?
The electricity is delivered via the grid, like the grey, the normal electricity. And we take the electricity off the grid. It's delivered like the normal, the grey electricity. And to determine the share of green electricity, we use green certificates, which prove the share of green electricity. So it's in a way, it's an accounting like mass balance.
So this means we already buy green electricity at our Wacker sites?
Absolutely. We buy green electricity for Holla in Norway and for several sites in Germany and also for a few small sites around the globe.
And Robert, why is it so important for us as Wacker that we indeed buy green electricity?
Well, basically, green energy is important to reduce greenhouse gases, to curb the greenhouse effect, and to limit global warming to the below 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. Mm-hmm. For Wacker, green energy is important to make our contribution to that climate goal. By reducing of greenhouse gases, is not only about reducing our own direct Scope 1 emissions, but also the emissions from purchased energy called Scope 2 emissions, and in addition all the emissions emerging from processes along the whole value chain. For example, the production of raw materials or some transport processes. And these emissions emerging from the value chain are combined in the so-called Scope 3 emissions.
Let's focus on the Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions. So why it is so important for us as a company that we specifically reduce this Scope 2 emissions coming from the purchased energy?
Production processes at Wacker need a big amount of energy. More than 70% of this process energy today is already based on electricity. For comparison, other chemical companies in Germany have an electrification level of about 10 to 20%. So we need a big amount of electricity, and some part of this electricity we generate by ourselves in our power plants, but the biggest part of this electricity we buy in. And this big part of purchased electricity determines our Scope 2 share of our total emissions. Wacker's climate goal is to halve the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 2030. And the purchase of green electricity is what plays the major role in our strategy to achieve this goal.
And is there anything to add on this Scope 2 emissions from the purchasing point of view?
Yeah, I would like to point out that at this early phase of transformation, it is easier and more cost efficient to focus on Scope 2 and buying electricity relative to focusing on Scope 3, meaning buying low carbon or carbon neutral raw materials. And the cost question is important because it's not only about sustainability, we also have to ensure the competitiveness of Wacker for the years to come.
And Christian, can you now explain to us how we as Wacker on the purchasing side try to secure our share in green energy or ideally even increase this share?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of options. The first option is, as Robert has already mentioned, we have on-site production. For a long time already, we have the run-of-river, the Alswerke hydro plant that still produces a significant, even if small, but a significant share of green electricity. We also look at PV on the roofs of our production sites. We have done this in Pilsen and in Tsukuba in Japan, and we are looking at this in a large project right now for Burghausen. Once we have that, we have the next green electricity from so-called power purchase agreements, which are direct agreements for green electricity with the developers, with the owners of a PV park or a wind park. That leads us to the next one, and that is just buying the certificates. The green certificates which prove that we get green electricity are part and parcel of a green PPA, and we can also buy them separately. And we can do so, and we have done some of that as well. And last not least, for the smaller sites where we have more decentral procurement, we just go to the suppliers and ask them for a green electricity tariff, and by that way, including a certification, we get green electricity.
So Christian, hearing this, wouldn't it be simply possible that Wacker buys 100% of the energy needed as green energy? Or are there any hurdles we have to consider?
There are indeed a few market hurdles. We do buy 100% green electricity, for example, in Norway for our Holla site. But when we look at the continent, green electricity is a scarce resource, and it's quite likely staying like this for some time. The reason is that the build-out of renewable capacity is relatively slow. When we look at the current offshore auctions, this is for wind parks that are going to be in production by the end of the 20s, maybe the early 30s. And PV is only mildly faster than that. So there will be not enough supply. In addition, on the demand side, we will see e-mobility requiring more green electricity, only making sense with green electricity, and also heat pumps will add demand. And on top of that, there is a German regulatory issue that EEG subsidized green electricity cannot be certified as green electricity for industrial players. So there is a scarcity situation that's going to remain. What is important is that nonetheless we accelerate the build-out of renewable capacities, not just on the German coast in the north, but also in the south. In that context, it's very important that projects like Rückenwind here in the district of Altötting get our full support, because we need, even in southern Germany, we need a lot of new capacity. Because green electricity for us, chemical industry and energy-intensive industry in general, is very important, and it has to be at cost-competitive price levels.
So, Robert, in your point of view, what else do we need to achieve our ambitious sustainability targets, and how can we as employees contribute to achieve these goals?
Well, we are well on track with our strategy to save energy, to electrify our processes, and to purchase green electricity. To achieve our climate goal until 2030, and finally to get completely climate neutral until 2045, we nearly need a complete electrification of our processes. From our employees, we need some new ideas for saving energy, and we need a sufficient availability of green electricity on all our sites. And that requires the support of local politics and of society.
Yeah, dear audience, we are already at the end of today's edition. I hope we were able to bring you a bit closer the topic of green electricity and the necessity for Wacker. Thanks a lot to my guests in the studio, Christian Essers and Robert Baumann, for the valuable explanations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, dear audience, let's work together to achieve the ambitious sustainability goals of Wacker. Thanks a lot for your interest and stay sustainable.
Wacker, creating tomorrow's solutions.